Janda, welcome back to our ongoing combined series of Operation Freedom Briefing and Dave versus the MSM. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll take this video and network it to all those you know and love. God knows it will not be supported, not be networked by either Rumble or YouTube or any social media platform. Why? Because our information is far ahead of the curve. And the cult that has choke points at all these social media platforms do not want you ahead of the curve. Why? Because it makes you an easier victim and target of their freedom stripping, financial stripping, health stripping, future stripping, very sinister, frankly, evil agenda. We are available with uncensored content. On content I cannot discuss on the radio or on any social media platform at davejanda.com. We are there 24/7 for you. I do 4 to 5 video format shows a week that are there. We have tremendous amount of free public information, our tail of the tape section, our hot take section, our featured interviews, our best of are all free. But where the real meat of the matter is, that puts you months and years ahead of the curve, and if you believe that's an overstatement, just look at our tail of the tape video, free, at davejanda.com on this and this. It's 4 minutes. But there are choke points at the FCC that control radio stations and at every social media platform, and an umbrella, censorship umbrella, coming through our State Department at the Global Engagement Center, along with, those little NGOs that have been funded through USAID. And they're choke points. And they have targeted my content and my platform, which is why davejanda.com exists. Become a member of our Freedom family, 30 cents a day, $9 a month, sign up month to month. But it truly, if you listen to our subscribers, the content is so far ahead of the curve, it'll save your life. That's what they say. And they're accurate. I know, I'm biased, but that's what they say. And they're right. And today I want to talk about a taboo subject, fraud. And the massive fraud by the cult, the globalist cult, and how it has been and is being and will be continued to be exposed to the benefit of every American and every person around the world. Elon Musk recently said they're hiding massive fraud and don't want their grift to end. This is how we know we are over the target. Everything Doge does will be published for the world to see. Let the public judge for themselves. That's the last thing the cult wants, right? They don't want accountability. They don't want transparency. They don't want truth. Because it interferes with their money laundering operation that has benefited them to the max and all their little puppets in governments around the world, not just the United States, around the world. And this is why the cult is being hysterical. They're histrionic. Look what they first did with Musk for starting to expose this and his dogistas. They first attacked Doge. Well, that didn't work so well. Then they attacked Tesla, right? The charging stations and the dealerships. And then remember back on March 10th, they launched a massive DDoS attack against X, Twitter, to shut them down. No, it didn't shut them down. A number of other people are stepping up. And speaking about the fraud, another reputable source is Ed Dowd, who's a financial analyst. Here's what he says. Looking at the fraud on the financial side of the equation, the revelations since the new administration took power have confirmed what many of us suspected. That the globalists, who are Democrats, who are rhinos, who are bureaucrats, and run NGO networks, have systemically pilfered the Treasury for decades while setting up retribution for those who have called attention to their operation. They've done this with censorship, lawfare, weaponization of government, and utilization of intel agencies executing psyops. In fact, when we look financially, a significant portion of our GDP, gross domestic product, is in fact a fraud. As we've always told you, the numbers coming out of the government for decades have been fraudulent. In the Trump 1 administration, there was some truth to them. Much more truth than we saw with Biden and Obama and Bushes and Clintons. And Dowd goes on, normies, not you because you're listening to this, but probably about 99% of those you know and love. Normies, translation, the clueless sect. Normies are still clueless how deep the rot goes in the system, but they're waking up a bit because of you. Because you've taken the time and the effort to educate them, to try to educate them. Now, I know, it's like planting a seed. You don't plant a seed and get the harvest in the same season. You've seen this. You've planted seeds of truth, facts, data, science that were stiff-armed by all those you brought it to, but then after a while, maybe months, maybe years, they came back to you and said, where'd you get that information? You have more? Because what you said, and I thought you were wrong. I knew you were wrong. Actually, I was wrong. You were right. You were ahead of the curve on this. Yeah. And the cults, what's really got them wired up, and I told you the attack of the dogistas, of the disruptors, was going to be on the money flow operation. Because if you shut off their money flow, you shut off their entire freedom stripping operation. And this is what we're seeing, which is why they're acting so hysterical, why they've targeted Musk and targeted Trump and those on the economic team around him, including the Treasury Secretary Bessent. The cult's government money laundering fraud operation is the center of President Trump's operation against the cult. About diminishing the government involvement in the economy and escalating the private sector, if you will, of the economy. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told the New York Economics Club, quote, "The first time I went to see President Trump, he looked at me and said, 'So how do we get this debt and deficit down without killing the economy?' I've been thinking about this for 18 months, and the way to do it, well, the way to do it is the transition from a public sector government-driven economy to a private sector-driven economy. Right now, 25% of the GDP, which makes it all fraudulent, goes through Washington, D.C., area code 202. You see, just look at the end of the Biden minute, whatever they were, goat rodeo. They were pumping up the GDP with smoke and mirrors, a debt. The destructive influence of debt. $1 trillion every 100 days to keep those figures just pumped up enough. Because we have been in a recession for years and, frankly, a depression for several years. Economic. Psychological, a bit depression with Il Demente in there. Not so depressed now that he's out and the hyena's out, the cackler. But see, folks, this is part of the reset that President Trump has talked about. Moving from a government-driven fraud economy to a private sector hard asset economy, along with revaluation of the dollar and revaluation of the debt. You see, as it becomes evident that we have been in a recession when the numbers are stripped out for years, what happens? And the stock market does go down. We've been seeing that. And the artificial levitation is starting to come apart. And when that happens, what happens? Bond rates fall. Remember, we have $7 trillion coming due over the next 6 months. As bond rates fall, when we reinvest that money, President Trump wants to do it at much lower interest rates. And as the economy, if you will, in a controlled demolition fashion, comes down a bit, it gives more latitude to tax cuts, regulation cuts, and further growth. But as I've told you, we're not going to grow out of $36 trillion of debt, several hundred trillion when you add the unfunded liabilities and mandates. Helps a bit. Doge's work helps a bit. But the ultimate way, other than defaulting, and that's not a controlled demolition, that's just a demolition, is to, well, devalue the dollar, devalue the debt. Pay your dollar's worth of debt in dimes and pennies. That's what's going on. And it's imperative that the current administration show that, wait, this is not from tariffs. This is not from... This is a hangover from Il Demente, Biden, and the cackler, Harris. From Zero Hedge, Bidenomics hangover worsens. Subprime auto loan delinquencies hit record high in January. Add to that, the U.S. banks. Oh, they're fine. Really? U.S. banks' unrealized losses explode by $118.4 trillion in just three months as FDIC declares 66 banks around the country are now on the problem list. The amount of unrealized losses on American banks' balance sheets is actually surging. Unrealized losses are the difference between the price banks paid for securities that they hold and the current market value of those assets. See, as they mark to market those assets, all of a sudden, whoa, we're not very solvent. In fact, we might be insolvent. And as they stop goosing the numbers and you're starting to come out with more realistic numbers, Atlanta Fed slashes GDP forecast again. They've now slashed the first quarter of 2025 GDP from plus 2.33% growth to a minus 2.825 decrease in GDP. That's a huge difference in economic terms, folks. And what's made it more difficult is the willful criminality. So here's the problem. You're going to talk to your friends and family. They're going to say, well, what a bad set of circumstances that this is all happening. What a bad set of coincidences. What a bad set of accidents. And what incompetence. No. All of this was put in the cards, and I've been telling you this for years. This takedown. It's just that right now, President Trump and his team are trying to prop up that demolition so it's more controlled. And the system was rigged to blow for years, many years. Doge's key revelation, a federal budget made into a maze impervious to reform, from Jim Varney. Complexity isn't an accident. It's a consequence of a government that has grown far beyond its core function and is tied down by self-serving bureaucracy and a public sector union power, said Ramoni Abashia, Director of Budget and Entitlement Policy at the Cato Institute. Quote, that complexity isn't just an inconvenience. It shields waste, fuels inefficiency, and makes reform harder, she stated. She went on, a government that has grown too big and too far-reaching makes it difficult to track what's spent, let alone rein it in. And that is not an accident, and it's not from incompetence. And add to that an antiquated technology system. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent revealed that the IRS and the Treasury Departments operate with an antiquated technology platform called COBOL, COBOL, which, as Besant says, and he's being kind, quote, has a lot of leaks. And imagine how these leaks have been weaponized. Yeah. You see, the antiquated system helped the cult with their ongoing takedown of the system. And now, our tech support guy, Elon Musk, and all those around him are trying to introduce a new technology platform that isn't antiquated, where payments can be traced, much to the chagrin of the money laundering cult. In fact, their efforts have already gained significant traction and results. Doge, 1 trillion American taxpayer dollars were stolen during this, from 2019 to almost still the present, or those that are still doing this. 70% of that money went overseas. And the hits, in many respects, still continue in many different ways against Musk for bringing the truth forward. Because that's what they do. See, it's not just DDoS attacks on Twitter. Quote, this is really going to get me assassinated, end quote. Musk issues warning over exposing DC corruption. During a recent experience on Rogan, Musk suggested that he'll be assassinated if he goes too deep into the corruption in DC. Quote, it's more than just insider trading. The stock portfolio stuff is quite trackable, but it's a lot more than insider trading. Rogan asked, you mean the way they're acquiring wealth? Musk said, yeah, correct. So what other methods? Musk didn't tell you. But I did. Starting in March of 2017, when we had Lieutenant General Tom McInerney, supported by Admiral Ace Lyons, on Operation Freedom, the radio show. March 19th, to be specific, 2017. They brought forward the fact that the Obama administration, Obama, Biden, Brennan, the CIA director, Clapper, DNI director, Susan Rice, Comey, Mueller, Hillary. They were involved and took a surveillance operation and made it illegal, looking at his adversaries, Trump, General Flynn, thousands of others. But they didn't just use it to surveil illegally. They used it as an entryway into corporations around the country and around the world to get inside information so they could trade on it. And now you know why people like Obama, that writes a book that nobody buys, or very few buy, can have 5, 6 mansions around the world, all worth millions of dollars each. Same with El Demente and Hillary and the rest of them. It's called the hammer. And that's what Musk couldn't talk about. But I told you about it, as did General McInerney and Admiral Lyons in 2017. And who denied it? The CIA. Because they used it for their little black market deals. So they could run their black operations, if you will. This is what Musk then said when he said, well, I can't really talk about the other methods. Quote, I mean, this is really going to get me assassinated, Musk replied. It's like I'm not lengthening my lifespan by explaining this stuff, to say the least. I mean, I was supposed to go back to DC. How am I going to survive? This is blanking going to kill me for sure. In fact, I do think like this. It's like I actually have to be careful that I don't push too hard on the corruption stuff because it's going to get me killed. Yeah. I did a video entitled Three Conversations that happened over 30 years ago in D.C. One of those conversations was reminiscent of what Elon Musk was talking about. Actually, it's carbon copy. Only it happened between myself and a really high-profile political figure in the spring of 1989. It's in that video. It's on our homepage under the best of the Three Conversations. DaveJanda.com. There for you, free. Can't put it up on social media. Can't talk about it on the radio. But the subscribers felt it was so important for people to hear it, it should be available on our uncensored platform at DaveJanda.com. And when Elon started looking at his threats, he found an investigation had found that 5 Act Blue funded groups, that's the Act Blue, that's the globalist Democrats' funding mechanism for all their campaigns around the country. 5 Act Blue funded groups responsible for the Tesla protests, the burning of power stations, of charging stations, and of dealerships. There are troublemakers. Disruption Project, Rise and Resist, Indivisible Project, and Democratic Socialists of America. Act Blue funders included George Soros, Reid Hoffman, Herbert Sandler, Patricia Baumann, and Lee Hunt Hendricks, according to Musk. Act Blue is currently under investigation for allowing foreign and illegal donations in criminal violation of campaign finance regulations. And, well, mid-March, 7 Act Blue senior officials resigned, including the Associate General Counsel. Do you think that might be related to their criminal activities and their money laundering activities? They can run, but they can't hide. And Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, kind of summed it all up. I'm shocked by the scale of fraud already uncovered by Doge. U.S. Treasury Secretary, this is from Zero Hedge, Scott Bessent, did the mainstream media press tour recently, clarifying 2 critical talking points to the propagandists. First, that Doge is doing a great job. And second, the U.S. economy faces some significant headwinds as a hangover from Bidenomics and their spendfest. Quote, I've got to tell you that I'm slightly shocked at some of the fraud we're finding with Doge's work. And you're going to be hearing more about this over the next couple weeks and months. We either solve the deficit or all we'll be doing is paying debt. It's not optional. America will go bankrupt if this is not done. And as Bessent stated, quote, what I find interesting is for the past year and a half and during the campaign, most of the media said, oh, the economy's great. It's just a vibe session, just a little bit, not even a recession. Now that President Trump's in office, there's an economic problem, according to those same bought-off lamestream fake media, I'll say it, whores. It took 4 years, more than that actually, to get us here. President Trump's been in office a small number of weeks. And I can tell you we're working on this every day, and they are. And they're working on a, if you will, controlled reset, controlled demolition type of reset. And with that comes restructuring of the dollar, restructuring, revaluation of the debt, exposure of the money laundering operations, bringing interest rates down. And the way you do that is with a slowing economy, but the economy has been slowing very slowly for years. But people have been given misinformation on the data, and the data will be made crystal clear of how this has been going on for so long. So what do? We educate and empower as many people as we can with the facts, the data that I just presented. Number 2, protect yourself. The single greatest insurance policy when economies slow, when revaluations occur of debt and of money, is hard assets. It's a great insurance policy. It stood the test of 5,000 years. Physical gold and physical silver. I've had Adriana Reed on this platform. She's one of the principals in a precious metals analyst from Camino Company, CAMINO, CaminoCompany.com. Go to their website. Contact her. Tell her that Operation Freedom is part of your education. She's very honest, very straightforward. I will speak to you about the power of hard assets in times of trouble. I do believe when we come through this tunnel, we'll be far better off than we were going into the tunnel. But the key is to make it less turbulent, more of a smoother ride. That smooth ride, I believe, the insurance policy behind that, it's being prepared. Financially, insurance policy, hard assets. That's what stood the time over years, decades, eons, 5,000 years. I thank you for joining me today. We are available 24/7 at DaveJanda.com. Please join us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.